Our meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Here. Trustee Gale. Trustee Holden. Trustee Katina.
Here.
Thank you, President Livingston. Trustee Kukler.
Here.
Trustee McCarty.
Here.
President Livingston.
Here. And with that, we have a quorum. Mr. Clerk, will you lead us in the pledge?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Couple of announcements first under item 2 on our agenda this evening, and then we have the oath of office for Fire Lieutenant James Baum. We will do that in a moment. While we're speaking about the fire department, we had a great fire department open house. Chief Vavra and fire department, well-attended, educational, and as usual, a lot of engagement between members of the fire department and the community. So thank you to the department and thanks to all those who were involved who participated. I want to thank President Kerry Steele from the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. We had a very nice event here October the 10th dedicating our new municipal stormwater-friendly lots, the one here out by where we hold the farmers market. It gave us a chance to talk about the many projects we've done with the MWRD and have continued to work on, including stormwater management. We've got Skeletober in Grange coming up, and this is, of course, where the local businesses join in for the Halloween walk in the downtown on Saturday, October 26th, and that includes a trick-or-treat parade, which will be held by local businesses beginning at 10 a.m. from Cossett School, continuing until noon, or at Cossett School. And of course, that's on the LGBA, so you can find that at their website, lgba.com. I want to thank Commissioners Katinek and Kukler, our liquor commissioners here in LaGrange. We convened earlier this evening to approve a Class A3 liquor license for Brothers Mexican Grill on 1014 South LaGrange Road. And the Liquor Commission recommends that this license be issued. And so the Village Board will be asked to consider that license at your October 28th meeting. Let's see, I believe that is it for my stuff. As is our custom, we always welcome one of our own who comes back. So welcome Trustee Barb Wolf this evening. We're glad you're back, former village trustee. With that, Andre, why don't you provide anything you have this evening, then we'll go to the oath of office.
Thank you, President Livingston. As previously reported, residents are invited to participate in a survey regarding the village's curbside refuse and recycling collection program. The village is seeking input regarding the village's program and whether changes or improvements should be considered as part of a new refuse contract. The current contract expires in April of 2020. A link to the online survey was provided in the village spokesman and is also located in on the village's website. Residents are asked to respond to the survey by Monday, October 21st. And as always, if you have any questions, please contact the Village Hall, 579-2300, extension 501. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. All right, we're now going to conduct something very important in our village life, and that's the oath of office for Fire Lieutenant James Baum. So with that, I'm going to ask James to come forward and the rest of the fire department, and maybe collect right over here, and we will provide a description. Oh, there he is. So come on up, and we'll begin to queue up our oath. So we had a retirement. Many of you were here for Lieutenant Brian Sybil, and therefore a vacancy was created within the rank of Fire Lieutenant. To fill that vacancy, on September 27th, the LaGrange Board of Fire and Police Commissioners promoted firefighter paramedic James Baum to the rank of Fire Lieutenant effective October 17th, 2019. James Baum began his fire service career in October 2010. He had previously served in the United States Army, rising to the rank of Staff Sergeant. James served in both Iraq and South Korea. He has received positive reviews from his supervisors and coworkers for his constructive approach to the job. He has taken time to continue to improve his skills as a firefighter and is completing his training as a specialized rescue technician by taking courses necessary in several disciplines. James holds numerous certifications from the Office of State Fire Marshal, Division of Personnel Standards and Education, including Fire Officer 1 and Instructor 2. James has completed his Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Service Administration and is currently pursuing a master's degree in Public Service Administration at Lewis University. Because of his involvement in training and education, one of his assignments, in addition to being a company officer, will be to work with the training division to improve the fire department training program and record keeping. So therefore, we recommend James Baum be invited to step forward. So we're here already, and we'll ask our venerable village clerk to step forward and administer the oath of office.
So we get a good shot of this. I, James Baum, having been appointed to the office of Fire Lieutenant
Having been appointed to the office of Fire Lieutenant,
in the village of LaGrange,
Village of LaGrange,
County of Cook,
County of Cook,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Illinois,
of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge
that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Fire Lieutenant
Fire Lieutenant
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
James, if you could introduce your family members. Who do you have with you tonight, James?
My wife, Michelle, my oldest, Drew, my youngest, Logan.
All right, let's give them a hand.
And the lieutenant's sons are pinning on his collar the badges for lieutenant of the fire department. And his wife pinned on his new badge. Again, congratulations.
Lieutenant, congratulations.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you and congratulations again. With that, I'm going to ask the clerk to read the items on the consent agenda, please.
My pleasure. Matters on the consent agenda will be considered by a single motion and vote because they have already been considered fully by the board in a previous meeting or have been determined to be of routine nature. Any member of the Board of Trustees may request that an item be moved from the consent agenda to current business for separate consideration. Item A, Engineering Services Agreement, Water and Sewer Rate Study. Item B, Material Purchase, Public Works Fiscal Year 2019-20 Tree Planting Program. Resolution, Public Works Suburban Tree Consortium. Item C, ordinance, disposal of surplus property, Police Department. Item D, minutes of the Village of LaGrange Board of Trustees regular meeting Monday, September 23rd, 2019. And item E, consolidated voucher 191014.
Thank you, Clerk Burns, and if you could read the items on the current agenda.
Under the current business to be considered by the board, item A, ordinance variation, minimum required rear yard, Jordan Eisenberg, 941 7th Avenue. And item B, ordinance amending the LaGrange Code of Ordinances to prohibit recreational cannabis business establishments and use of cannabis in LaGrange public places.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And with that, we will move to item 4 on our agenda this evening, and those are comments regarding matters that are on our agenda, public comments regarding matters that are on our agenda this evening. Seeing none, item 5 is consideration of our consent agenda.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
It's been moved by Trustee Holder. Is there a second? Trustee McCarty? Trustee Augustine?
As previously stated, I recuse myself from voting on items on the voucher related to the village prosecutor.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. It's been moved and seconded. Comments or questions on the motion?
I have a question.
Trustee Holder?
Ryan, the Baxter and Woodman agreement, while we've been successful with them before, is there a reason that we don't put this out to bid, or are they the only ones really qualified because of their experience both with the village as well as the subject matter?
Sure. In this case, it's something that we have an existing task order agreement with Baxter and Woodman, and they've done, I think, something like 30 to 40 of these studies before for other communities. So we felt like with our task order agreement and their expertise that they would be a good fit for the village.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Holder. Thank you, Ryan. Other questions or comments? Trustee Kukler?
Ryan, looking at the tree replanting program, why is the average unit price for 2019 higher than what we expect it to be for 2020, if I'm reading it right?
Well, I'd have to take a look at the details here. Sometimes it's a factor of, depending on the species of trees, that the spring trees may be more expensive than the fall trees, and that's probably the case, or vice versa in this particular case.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Kukler. Other questions or comments on the consent items? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk, roll call vote.
Trustee Kukler.
Aye.
Trustee Kotinik.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Holder.
Aye.
Trustee McCarty.
Aye.
With that, the consent agenda is approved. Item number 6, items under current business. Item A, ordinance, variation, minimum required rear yard, Jordan Eisenberg, 941 7th. Referred to Trustee Gale.
Thank you, President Livingston. The petitioner, Jordan Eisenberg, owner of the subject property at 941 7th Avenue, wishes to construct an attached garage in addition to the rear of his house. The construction as proposed would encroach into the minimum required rear yard as required in paragraph 3-110C4 of the LaGrange zoning code. Per the zoning code, the minimum required rear yard for the subject property is 26.82 feet, which is 20% of the lot depth, and the proposed construction would result in a rear yard of 6 feet. The proposed construction would not require any other variation from the code. In particular, the project otherwise meets lot and building coverage requirements. On September 19th, 2019, the Zoning Board of Appeals held a public hearing on this matter. At the hearing, the petitioner testified that the requested variation will allow him to construct a 2-car garage and a functional 3-bedroom floor plan. The petitioner further testified that the placement of the existing house and the characteristics of the home's foundation represented a unique physical condition on the property. At the hearing, one member of the public spoke in favor of the application. No person spoke against the application. After hearing testimony and deliberating, the Zoning Board of Appeals voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the variation as presented. Staff and the village attorney have prepared the attached ordinance, which is in our packet, that would authorize the variation. So at this point, I move for a vote on the ordinance presented, granting the variance.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments on the motion?
Did we get an additional letter from a resident that was proximal, or is that on the next case? And I remember an email saying that it was after, was
Oh, that was
received
the-
after the meeting?
I believe that was the next item. Is that
Okay.
what you're, oh, say that again?
Yes, we received a letter of support from a resident, neighboring resident, after the Plan Commission met, or the ZBA met.
And it was someone proximal to him?
Charity, was it directly a neighbor, a direct neighbor?
I believe it was a direct neighbor. If you could bear with me just one second, I can pull it up.
Because that would mean two people spoke out for him and no one
Correct.
against.
So there's two that have expressed support, one at the hearing and one in writing after the hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Thank you, Trustee Holder. Other questions or comments on the motion? Trustee Gale and Trustee McCarty.
Yeah, mine's a quick one. It's just also for Charity. Can you explain why a detached garage can be within 3 feet of the property line, but then if one's attached, it's got to meet that side backyard lot requirement?
Sure. So as an attached garage, it's considered part of the principal structure and therefore has to meet the setbacks and the yard requirements for the principal structure. Accessory structures, such as a detached garage, have different setback requirements. Accessory structures, such as a detached garage, oftentimes have different potential impacts as a principal structure. For example, a detached garage is just for the storage of vehicles versus at the principal structure, the home, you may have, windows open and sound coming from the structure. So there's different reasons for different setback requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Trustee McCarty.
Thank you, President Livingston. Just a couple of quick clarifications, Charity. This is a corner lot, isn't it?
Correct.
That's part of the issue. And technically, the front of the house by zoning faces 7th Avenue. But in the actual knock on my front door faces 52nd Street. And also, it's set back approximately 43 feet from the front property line, which is effectively a side yard for this person.
Correct.
And then that's part of the reason this comes up, is because of the unique nature of this lot relative to the way most houses are set up in LaGrange. Is that correct?
Correct. The Zoning Board of Appeals discussed that at length, that the home is really not centered on the lot and is set back farther to the east.
And it's actually a pretty big size lot. 75 feet, there's not very many 75-foot lots in LaGrange.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're giving extra front yard at the expense of their backyard. And if I'm reading this right, they will only have about 4 feet to build on and not encroach in the backyard?
Into the rear yard?
Yes.
Pardon me.
Yeah, I think you said I think the required rear yard is about 27 feet, and if my math is right, they're at about 30 feet or 31 feet. So they would only have 4 or 5 feet to
Yeah,
build
they have
the thing.
about 4 feet that they could go back toward the rear lot line.
Okay. And I just want to be sure again, there were no one protested, no one came to and spoke at the,
No objections.
okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Trustee McCarty. Charity? Other questions on the motion? All right, seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. Mr. Clerk, roll call.
Trustee Augustine.
Aye.
Trustee Holder.
Aye?
Trustee Kotinik.
Aye.
Trustee Kukler.
Aye.
Trustee McCarty.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
Aye.
With that, the motion passes. Item B, ordinance, amending the LaGrange Code of Ordinances to prohibit recreational cannabis, business establishments, and use of cannabis in LaGrange public places. Refer to Trustee Gale.
Thank you. In June 2019, Governor Pritzker signed the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, the Act, which legalizes the sale, possession, and use of cannabis for recreational purposes in limited quantities by persons 21 years and older, beginning January 1st, 2020. Under the Act, municipalities have the ability to prohibit, allow, or significantly limit the location of recreational, parentheses, adult use, cannabis businesses. Cannabis business types include dispensaries, cultivation centers, craft growers, processors, infusers, and transportation organization. At the July 8th, 2019 Village Board meeting, Village Attorney Mark Birkeland provided a general overview of the Act. The Coalition for a Drug-Free Lyons Township provided a presentation on the topic, and the Village Board adopted a resolution advising the public that recreational cannabis businesses are currently prohibited and that the village would be studying the matter further. The Village Board discussed the matter again at our September 23rd Village Board meeting. Information regarding the act was posted to the village's website, and the public was invited to provide comments. After discussion, a majority of the Village Board stated that the village should opt out of recreational cannabis and directed staff and the village attorney to prepare an opt-out ordinance. Staff and the village attorney have prepared such an ordinance as requested that prohibits cannabis business establishments and the use of cannabis in public places. The establishments and the public places are defined within the ordinance. Public places are defined generally in the Act, but the Act does not include detail about private events, private social clubs, or classes in those public places. The attached ordinance defines public places further as including private events in business establishments. If the Village Board approves the ordinance, then the staff will prepare appropriate amendments to the zoning code consistent with the Village Board's action. Those amendments will be presented to the Plan Commission, which will conduct the required public hearing for amendments at its November meeting. The Plan Commission will prepare findings and a recommendation to the Village Board. In addition, the staff and village attorney will review various provisions of the Code of Ordinances to determine any other necessary changes to the code. The staff anticipates submitting those changes for the Village Board's consideration at an upcoming meeting. It should be noted that under the Act, a prohibition of recreational cannabis businesses cannot include a prohibition of medical cannabis dispensaries, which were added to the village's zoning code as a special use in the I-1 Light Industrial District in 2014, with the condition that a dispensary is not permitted next to a residential property. To date, no medical cannabis dispensary is located in Grange. The village and staff are available to answer any questions that we may have as we deliberate. And at this point, I move for a vote on the ordinance regarding cannabis businesses and uses as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments on the motion?
I can start, I guess.
Trustee Kukler.
Yes, as I explained at our last meeting, I'm in favor of regulating versus prohibiting, so I'll be voting no.
Thank you, Trustee Kukler. Trustee Gale.
I just wanted to also add my comments to Trustee Kukler's comments as well. I think this is something we could regulate and still fit within the village of Grange, so I'll be voting no as well.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Other comments, questions? Trustee McCarty.
Thank you, President Livingston. And I want to thank you for the method with which you brought this to the table. I thought it was nice the village was able to comment on it, to have some input. And I found two things interesting in the comments that I've gotten relative either in person here or through emails. One was people are discussing the add-on benefit of having marijuana sales in the town, and I really find that inconsistent. They're unlike alcohol sales where a restaurant or something would grow up around that. I don't see any true add-on benefits for having a cannabis sales in the village. And then what I also found was a great conflict in where people wanted it. Some people said, oh, it's okay as long as we put it south of 47th Street, or it's okay if we don't put it in, if we put it in an industrial area, or it really should be right next to Palmer's. And I don't think as a village we could ever agree on where the appropriate spot is. And I don't think it's right to have that discussion too much in a village this small. And then, as I mentioned before, I think the regulations are completely inconsistent with good health concerns and with good governance, and for those reasons, I'm going to vote for this resolution.
Thank you, Trustee McCarty. Are there questions or comments on the motion? Trustee Holder?
Not to rehash what I said the last time, but I want to agree with Trustee McCarty and also with you, President Livingston, as you said once before, that this is something we can always reallow. We can always change the ordinance and reallow, but once that door is opened, it's very difficult to close. I do agree with Trustee McCarty that this is not in keeping with the character of this village. For those, and my emails and comments have run 9-1 against, if anybody's keeping track. In fact, I only have 3 people that said they were for it. So the other thing is, all 3 people cited the tax benefits that might accrue from this, but in fact, what has happened to the tax benefits in the state of Colorado, who's been at this the longest, so it's probably the best comparable, is a dramatic change. It is running at 10% of what it was originally, not 10% less, 10% of. Sales have gone down. Prices of cannabis stocks, there was a nice article in the Journal today, the prices of cannabis stocks have been cut in half because the companies have all lowered their revenue forecasts and have no plans to make profit anytime soon. So the business itself is kind of rocky. The profit motive or revenue motive for the village is a flash in the pan based on the experience of others a great deal longer than us. And think about the experience in Colorado where they were the only ones. Well, we will be one of many states that have legalized cannabis. So in keeping with the nature of the village, the same logic that, frankly, we use for tobacco stores and bars, that we're a restaurant-friendly, a family-friendly, a community-friendly place, and the same logic, frankly, that we use for video gaming. I will vote against this. And therefore, in favor of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Holder.
A yes is no, right?
Questions or comments on the motion? Trustee Gale?
Thanks. I forgot to and neglected to include, and Trustee Holder reminded me of it. I'd like to ask staff if we could produce a memo, perhaps a year after the act has been in place, in order to see how things have flushed out in both the area and the state, to see if things are better, worse. It's a new industry. Let's see how it's developed. So thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Yes, that's something, that's a good idea. We'll do that. Trustee Augustine.
Well, I think I know how things are going to go tonight. I think we figured that out in our last meeting. But what we're asking really is what's right for LaGrange. And everybody who lives in LaGrange has a say in that. Sometimes we make decisions that go against the popular sentiment, and sometimes we don't. But we're unlikely to find issues where we all agree 100%. But boy, we did sure come close on the gambling issue in LaGrange. There's very, very little support for that. But allowing retail cannabis, that's an issue where there is much more support, certainly much more for gambling. And I am finding, and maybe it's just me, that people are coming forward to support it. All ages, all demographics. There's no one type of person who seems to be supportive of this. Generally, they say don't miss out on the revenue. I get that. But for the most part, they don't see as much of the downside as there can be, and as we have seen and as we have been shown. So yes, generally it does come down to being a revenue issue, but it's interesting because, again, the gambling issue was voted down solely because we don't need this in our town. It's not worth the revenue. But yet for this issue, people do believe it might be worth looking at. We might be able to handle this well. We might be able to be an example for other villages. It is coming to Illinois. Whether we like it or not, it will be down the street, available down the street. And to miss out on that revenue, some would say due to fear or lack of vision, upset some residents who are unwilling to come forward. So I'm here to speak for some of those comments that I have received, and I feel it's important for them to be noticed. So will it be the panacea for revenue? Will it help us pay for more streets? Will it help us do anything gigantic? I doubt it. I mean, we heard projections. If we had a $20 million retail business, we might see 600,000, but I think we all know that that's not going to happen. It'll be much smaller than that, but it will be real money if it came here, and no one knows if a retailer would even consider coming to a town of our size. And if they did, where would they go, and where would we want them to go? And I feel like that is something that we haven't considered. We've talked about a little bit, but we haven't really considered that. And I know some people, as was said earlier, some residents feel that if there were the right place, again, possibly south of 47th, somewhere outside of our central business district where a lot of our children run around, if it were there, they'd consider it. They'd consider it big time. So I would just like to see us discuss this more. I know how the vote's going to go tonight. I don't expect it to be different than what I thought it was coming in, but I'd like to see us consider this, and I think having some support for considering it within this vote, even if it fails, to produce cannabis being sold in LaGrange, it's worth further consideration. And so for those reasons, I plan to vote no on this ordinance, to opt out, so that we can give it more consideration. And if I feel if some of us vote to if a few of us don't vote to opt out, it won't come up again anytime soon. And if we don't do it now, we miss out on the impact of the revenue. If we wait a few years, we might get some revenue, but not much. And again, I'm not saying do it for the revenue. I'm definitely not saying that, and I'm not saying I'm fully or even leaning in towards doing it. I just feel like we need to consider it a bit more and give some people time to come forward with some of their support.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Any other questions or comments on the motion? All right, seeing none. Mr. Clerk, roll call vote.
Trustee Kotinik.
Aye.
Trustee Kukler.
No.
Trustee Holder.
Aye.
Trustee Gale.
No.
Trustee Augustine.
No.
Trustee McCarty.
Aye.
President Livingston.
Well, with that, I will break the vote here. And before I do, I will speak to my vote. We've done a good job, I think, here to some of the comments of hearing you in the community. This is something that generated a lot of communications, and I think we're well positioned to listen to those communications. I want to commend the board and the staff. I think there's been a good amount of discussion going back for several months. We look at how other communities discuss this issue, and we're above the notch in terms of the time we took to look at the issue. I want to commend Rose Ashby. She's one of our residents who I saw in Springfield advocating for this bill with the main sponsor, Senator Heather Staines. There's a lot in the bill that is commendable that I think many of us would agree with, that deal with social justice reform in the Cook County penal system, and other such things. So, commend her for her passion in getting out there and being organized and getting a bill passed that was quite comprehensive. I'm going to vote certainly in favor to opt out, so in favor of the ordinance to ban it. Easy call for me, not even close. This is the right action for the right time in the right place, LaGrange. This is something where we have gone against the grain when it wasn't all that popular. Look at the hospital building when it was constructed. Look at the theater loan, the library, the parking deck, the Uptown LaGrange, all opposed. The TIF district, some vigorously and vehemently opposed. So we do look at all sides and really take that into account. But there are a few issues I've heard over the years where people said, I'm not sure I would have moved here. And I know that's an emotional statement, had I known this was going to be something we were in favor of. None of those other issues I mentioned, did that ever come up? And even in video poker, it was, as Trustee Augustine said, a little bit easier debate, more one-sided. So I think by opting out now, this is something we can keep our eyes open. Even in this veto session in Springfield, there's going to be tweaks to the legislation. But this comes January 1. And so we need to let our business community know what's up and be predictable as we have to the outside world as to what they can and cannot invest in. So this is the right timing for LaGrange. And I think you can be assured that we will evaluate this down the road a year from now and also continue to have the conversation in terms of the issue. But with that, we'll break the tie, and I will vote aye. All right. We have no other items under current business this evening. And we will move to item 7, which is items, comments from the public on items not on our agenda this evening. Not on our agenda this evening. All right. Seeing none, we will move to item 8, which is trustee comments. Trustee comments this evening. Trustee Kukler.
Thank you, President Livingston, and I just wanted to follow up on what you were saying regarding the cannabis, and start with thanking all the residents that have shared their opinion on this, gave their feedback. It's real helpful, and it's much appreciated. I'd also like to thank staff who provided all the information that we needed as a board to make as informed decision as possible. The truth is, we're not really sure what the future holds on this, and so we were just all doing our best. And then I'd like to thank my fellow board members and President Livingston. It's obviously was a contested vote, a 3-3 broken by the president's vote, but everybody handled it so professionally, and I just thought it was a great way to have the matter evaluated and voted on. So thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Kukler. Other comments? Trustee Augustine.
Agree. I came in here tonight knowing that regardless of the way I voted, a lot of people were going to be disappointed. And we'll hear about it. But we are a strong board. We're going to continue to look at it. And I ask only this. We, and I think for the right reasons, voted to not allow gambling and many issues that could generate revenue. And we may never have cannabis in this town, and that would be fine by me. However, we need to continue to increase revenue every year. And we do have to sometimes look at things that may seem a bit uncomfortable and take some risks and look at what it could be if we manage it, have some faith in how we might do it. And I'm, again, not saying it's this issue, but we do need to start to consider how we bring in more business, sustain the business we have, build another parking garage. Where does that money come from? We're a great town, we're well-run. I'm really, really proud of that, but I'm just trying to think, I am trying to think a bit about some of our fiscal needs down the road.
Thank you, Trustee Augustine. Trustee Gale and Trustee McCarty? Sorry, Trustee McCarty, I should have.
Thanks, Mr. President Livingston.
Okay.
I just wanted to echo those similar comments about how we handled this issue, and it's one of the things that makes me so proud to be on this board. We've had several contentious matters in just the few years I've been on this board, and it's always been handled professionally. It's been thoroughly debated and discussed, but it never gets it never gets ugly, if you will, and that's it's one of the great things about Grange and about how we operate as a board, professionally analyzing it, having the vote, and then moving on. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Trustee Gale. Trustee McCarty?
Thank you, President Livingston. Also, thanks to the board for their reasoned debate on this. I think it was a great exercise. I'd also like to point out, to, as Steve Stone would say, all you kids out there. At this board meeting tonight, we talked about smoke, we talked about weed, we talked about trash, and we talked about trees. These are the kinds of things that really keep the village running. We promoted a fire officer. We bought trees to keep our streets lined with beautiful trees. And we have an opportunity for every resident to participate in a survey about how they prefer their trash pickup. And I think those are all important things. And that's really the heart and soul of what goes on in this village. And I thank everybody who lives here for that, too.
Thank you, Trustee McCarty. All right, if there are no other trustee comments this evening, we do not have any items under closed session this evening. So with that, we will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned until October the 28th at 7:30. Thank you.